Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, March 3rd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 181 days. The game against Michigan in 272 days. The start of spring practice, well, that's just 2 days away. We're going to be talking about Ohio State spring practice again today. We're going to be doing it with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Now, I'm going to tell you the title or the idea of this show, and you're going to say, wait a minute, didn't you guys do this last week? And the answer is no, but hold on. Thank you for listening. We always appreciate the feedback. Today's show is the 5 Buckeyes with the most on the line this spring. Right now you're saying, you guys did that show last week. No. That was the 9 Buckeyes with the most approved. So those are guys who played fewer than 100 snaps last year. Today, mostly guys who played more than that, but it's also guys who are, it's not quite their last chance or their last best chance, but it might be in their best interest to have a real good spring and lock up a starting spot right now, because there's probably talented folks behind them, or this might be kind of a last opportunity for them. So we're going to be talking about 5 of those guys. And Tony, we're going to start at the quarterback position with Devin Brown. Devin Brown was locked in a positional battle last summer with Kyle McCord, ended up falling behind McCord at late in camp. McCord won the job. Brown played a role at times, kept getting hurt, finally got the starting nod in the Cotton Bowl, got hurt, and now Ohio State has brought in a transfer quarterback, Will Howard. It feels like if it's going to happen for Devin Brown, it should really happen pretty soon.
Yeah, and you think back to, it only takes a couple of bad days for a quarterback to lose a job if it's that close. And from what we were told last year, it was, as one week it was Devin Brown, the next week it was Kyle McCord. What if that week where Kyle McCord took over towards the end of camp, Devin Brown would have stayed where he was? What would the situation at quarterback be this year? If Devin Brown had started all last year, what would he have done? Would Ryan Day have felt compelled to go into the portal? And of course, the other question is, would Ryan Day have gone into the portal if Kyle McCord hadn't gone into the portal? And so now that Ryan Day has gone into the portal for a quarterback, it's one of those situations where Devin Brown viewed himself as the starter going into the Cotton Bowl, which he was. Probably viewed himself as the starter coming out of the Cotton Bowl, which he is not yet. And he was always going to have to win a job in fall camp. And he still will have to do that. But you don't want to fall behind a transfer in the spring. And you certainly don't want to fall behind later on. Because if you fall behind right now in the first batch of practices, the first 15 practices that Will Howard is a part of, how are you going to keep him from just blowing past you in the summer and then in fall camp as well? So spring is going to be huge for Devin Brown to not only establish himself as the quarterback, but to also maintain some sort of distance from Will Howard. And it's going to be difficult, but it's also going to push him to be better and to be a better quarterback. And so in that way, it will benefit Ohio State. Just not even Will Howard starting or not, just Devin Brown getting that competition is going to make him a better player. Will it be good enough?
And the next guy we're going to be talking about is someone who's going to be potentially very closely linked to Devin Brown, and that is the guy who is snapping him the ball. And that is Carson Hinsman. Carson Hinsman is sort of in a very similar position to Devin Brown, where he, late in the season and really all season, the center job was his. And then he had a few bad days and lost the center job for the Cotton Bowl. And then Ohio State brought in a veteran transfer. And in this case, it's Seth McLaughlin, the center from Alabama. So Carson Hinsman now has the opportunity, potentially, to win back the starting job and be the starting center for Ohio State for the second year. Or when you look at the fact that, much like Will Howard, they just brought in another transfer, a veteran transfer, to give them, at least a level of confidence and a level of surety there at that position. So this is another one where if Carson Hinsman comes out of the spring not as the number one center, it feels like that might tell you a lot about the fact that he's probably not going to be the number one center this fall.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the first things I'm looking for when we get to see some of practice, perhaps on Tuesday in a couple of days, just seeing where is Carson Hinsman lining up. If they do still have him competing at center, or if they've already just decided to move on from that, because it sure felt like they moved on from it in the Cotton Bowl when they didn't bother playing him and they put Matt Jones over there. And so there's a trend in these names we're going to talk about in terms of, hey, here's a guy from the portal, a starter, started think 8 games in 2022, 14 games last year for Alabama. He's coming to play center. Now Seth McLaughlin has said, I can play elsewhere. I'll do whatever. But they've gone into the portal to get a center. So what does that tell you? That tells you that they didn't get enough from that position last year. And even though Carson Hinsman is expected to be better than he was last year, they want somebody that is better than that. And this is another instance of the competition will make him better. But I do wonder if there's even going to be a competition, and if the competition for Hinsman might be at right guard. And maybe that doesn't happen right away. Maybe that's practice 7 or something like that. But it's something we'll both be watching for sure.
Definitely a couple. They'll be very close together. So I guess we'll get a good chance to watch both of those and track them, and we'll keep an eye on that all throughout the spring. Next up is a guy in a little bit of a different position than Carson Hinsman and Devin Brown, and that is G. Scott Jr. He is now entering his 5th season with the Buckeyes, and he is right now finally in line to be the starting tight end. He started as a wide receiver, transferred over to tight end, and then was stuck behind Cade Stover, which no great shame in that. Cade Stover is going to go down as one of the best tight ends in Ohio State history, so being the number 2 guy behind him, that's not so bad. So he comes in now after 4 seasons, 20 catches, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been a role player, and the question now, Tony, is can he win that job and hold off a talented group of younger guys who are behind him who would also like to be tight end number 1?
Yeah, and I think I wrote this last week that the winner of the tight end position will be whoever is the best blocker of the group. And that has been something that's been a criticism of G. Scott's game, which you would understand, being a former wide receiver and having to become something that you weren't expected to be, but you went through this process. You've gotten better every year. But this is something that's still relatively new to you compared to everybody else in this competition. You go into the portal, you bring in Will Kazmarek, who you mentioned G. Scott has 20 career catches. Kazmarek has had at least 20 catches each of the past 2 years. So even though he's like this 6'6", 256-pound blocking tight end, he's also been part of the passing game. And I will advise people to just he also ran a jet sweep last year in the bowl game to give you an idea of the different ways. He's not just a blocker, basically, is what I'm saying. And he can be a downfield threat. And that's something that we've always envisioned for G. Scott. Once the move got made, it was, this is he's going to be one of these NFL type tight ends that are, in the passing game. And that has taken a long time. And you said Cade Stover, an NFL tight end, has been in front of him. Now you can see, like, you have all of this greenery in front of you, and you just have to stay ahead of the person coming over here, like Will Kazmarek or Jelani Thurman, who eventually is maybe the best of the bunch, but he's still young. G. Scott, 5th year. Obviously, you don't want to get passed by somebody younger, but also I think all of these guys have different skill sets. So then it just becomes, you might see G. Scott out there for the majority of the snaps, or for more snaps than anybody else. But sometimes he's just going to be a blocker. Sometimes he's obviously going to be the complement to Kazmarek, or perhaps Kazmarek is the complement to him, or they're both the complement to Jelani Thurman, where you might be out there a lot, but that doesn't mean you are the target among the tight ends. So it's, I think we're all interested to see what he can do as a guy that is the number 1 target. Cade Stover was probably the number 3 target last year, which is a bump up. If can G. Scott maintain that level of, you are this high in the progression, we're going to call more plays like this because you're higher in the progression, you are the first read. Will they be able to utilize him in that way? And I think that's what we've all envisioned for him, certainly what he's envisioned for himself in making the move. But again, it's spring. You better show that, yes, this is what I can do. And we always talk in the spring, this is where the tight ends get involved in the passing game. So I won't be surprised to hear him talked about.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the kind of low-key, very interesting position battles, because you got a whole bunch of different dynamics there. You got the long-time kind of tight end number 2 who's trying to earn that first string spot. You got the transfer guy. You got the guy who was suspended all of last year. You've got the guy who was a really promising true freshman last year who, the athleticism is off the charts. There's a lot of interesting stuff to watch there. You got the longtime walk-on who has sort of fought his way onto the depth chart, and Patrick Gerd kind of doing the old Mitch Rossi thing. So a lot of interesting different pieces there to keep an eye on. That'll be a fun one to watch all spring long. On the other side of the ball, I've got two names here, and these are two guys who are on here for very different reasons. We're going to start with Mitchell Melton, and he's, I think, the only one of these guys who was pretty much healthy all last year and honestly probably could have been part of the last show. He played less than 100 snaps last year. So did Devin Brown, but that was a function of injury, not of depth chart. So Mitchell Melton is someone who, for a couple of years now, we keep hearing the jack is coming. He's going to play the jack. Here we go. It's going to happen any day now. Keep waiting. Almost there. And then last year he played 63 snaps. Obviously a very talented defensive end room. We have really not seen the jack. That's a whole separate conversation that I'm sure we'll have at some point this spring. I'm just not emotionally ready to have it again without actually seeing it on the field. But Mitchell Melton, it feels like this is, if it's going to happen for Mitchell Melton, it should start happening this spring.
Well, and we hear good things about him in camp. That's when he's at his best because that's when he's actually getting reps, and we don't get to see him during the season much. But he's an incredibly quick pass rusher, and obviously this is going to be a deep group of defensive ends, and we've talked about, will we see the jack this spring, and that's still up in the air. James Laurinaitis says it's still part of the package, but I don't know if it's going to be part of the package in the spring. It generally isn't. Obviously, it wasn't last year. And so I think right now, Mitchell Melton is probably the fifth defensive end, and he's going to have to hold off like Edric Houston. And if we're talking about the jack, he's going to have to hold off C.J. Hicks and perhaps Arvell Reese. And so he's got some young guys bearing down on him, but there's some veterans ahead of him. And I know we've talked about JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer probably don't need many reps this spring, so that's going to be an opportunity for Mitchell Melton to get in there. You've got another young guy, Joshua Mickens, in there that's going to be getting his first spring. We'll see how he does. But yeah, this is a big moment for him. He has probably one more year after this due to injury if he wants, Mitchell Melton. But you don't want to get passed by younger guys, even though he essentially already has with Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson. Injuries obviously have played a part in that. The lack of the position that they've kind of made for him has also impacted his playing time. And I know there's obviously Jim Knowles has talked very highly of him. There's a lot of loyalty there. There's a lot of, we'd like to get him on the field. You just got to do it. And this spring is an opportunity for him to reassert and remind the coaches that, yes, hey, Coach Jay, I'm here. I am ready. And I've pretty much mastered the defense in terms of knowing everything I need to know, knowing all of my roles. And I can keep your guys fresh. I can be fresh. And he'll have an opportunity to show a lot this spring, I think.
And someone else who has had an opportunity to show a lot on the field already, but who's still kind of in for a pretty important spring, is Sonny Styles. He obviously played more than 500 snaps last year as a safety. We talked to Ross Fulton about him on yesterday's morning show, so you have already heard a whole bunch about Sonny Styles. But he's heading into a pretty big spring because there's a way this spring ends with him. If he chooses to stay at safety, he may be only a role player for this team. If he chooses to move to linebacker and ends up winning one of the starting linebacker jobs, well, he could be potentially NFL draft eligible after this season and off to the NFL. That's at least a possibility because remember, he enrolled a year early. This is one, Tony. We've talked a bunch about Sonny Styles, obviously, this spring because he has been one of the most requested topics on this and pretty much every show and every message board around the Ohio State football sphere. But this is a spring that I think could go a couple very different ways for Sonny Styles, where the talent's there, the athleticism's there, and it's just a matter of, can they find a spot where he can take advantage of all of that?
Yeah, and that's probably going to be the number one position everybody is watching just to see where he is lining up. And at least with, I said we'll be watching Carson Hinsman. They're all going to be warming up as offensive linemen, so you really won't be able to know what he's doing until they line up in the 5. With Sonny Styles, we'll be able to know right away, okay, he's still at safety. The next time we're in, okay, he's still at safety. And then the first time we see him, he's like, oh, lining up with the linebackers, everybody's going to be on their phone, texting or tweeting it out, or don't tweet it from practice. It's not allowed. But right away, you'll have an idea. And I understand they like the novelty or the rarity, the uniqueness of having somebody that big at safety. But the reason you don't generally have somebody that big at safety is because it's a liability in coverage. And you see pictures of him. He's still listed at 6'4", 230. I do not believe he is still 230. If you look at some of the pictures that Ohio State is putting out, he looks like a linebacker. Not that he hasn't always looked linebacker-ish, but the way he's looking right now and the availability for playing time, the positional availability. Now they may want to have him do a bunch of or several different things. How many snaps are available to him at safety? And can he be so versatile that, sure, on first down, he is at nickel, and on second down, he's at will? I don't know if that's asking too much of him or if we're just making more of it than we need to. So, yeah, I have no idea what's going to shake out there. I think, obviously, we've talked about it in the past. His best option, I believe, is to move to linebacker full-time. We'll see how long that takes to maybe that's already been done. Ryan Day has said that we'll talk about it. They'll talk to the family about it. Matt Guerrero and James Laurinaitis have both said, we'll see how it goes. So, Tom, we'll see how it goes.
Well, we will see how it goes, and we will see how it goes starting on Tuesday when we're there for the first spring practice of the season. We actually have some sort of sneak preview interviews coming on Monday as well. So it is going to be a week filled with Ohio State spring football content. Hooray. It's not quite football season, but it's almost football season. It's a type of football season, and this time of year, we'll take it. That's pretty good. So we will be there for all of that good stuff this week, and we hope you guys can join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com to talk about it all. Tony, Kevin, and I covering the team, Mark covering recruiting, our whole team of X's and O's gurus, making you a smarter football fan, telling you what they're seeing and what it all maybe means, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And also, of course, we'll have all those interviews at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. Make sure you're subscribed there. We'll try and get you some camp video coming this week. As Tony said, no tweeting from practice. We got rules to follow, but there is we are usually able to give you some practice video as well. So get a little sneak peek inside what is going on at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center all this week at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.